Do you ever feel stuck in the same patterns of thinking or behavior? Do you ever get frustrated that you keep reacting to the same situations in the same way? Or do you feel puzzled why people in your life see things so differently than you? If you do, listen on. This week's episode and future weeks, we're going to be diving in to the very deep, interesting world of the Enneagram, and I'm so excited to share it with you. Welcome back, everybody, to the Grow RDH podcast. If you are new here, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Katie, and we put out these podcasts every Friday. If you are a repeat listener, thank you so much. Please like, share, subscribe, and share this content with any dental hygienist that you think might value it. This week, we are starting off our Enneagram series. If you are new to the Enneagram, I'm so excited for you to join me on this journey. And if you are an Enneagram loyalist, you know it, you are interested in learning more, I'm excited you're here. We are going to be learning about the Enneagram, the 9 types, and I personally believe this is not just another personality quiz. There are so many personality, different types of quizzes, questionnaires, theories around personality and why we do the things we do. And in my job and in some different books clubs that we've done, I have really been able to dive into a number of different personality traits and characteristics. I'm thinking like Myers-Briggs or the 4 tendencies. Those are all really valuable and really important. But what stands out to me is the Enneagram is very different. The way it was developed and the way that it presents insights into your internal motivations is so unique, and it is one of the personality trait type quizzes that I have personally connected with because it is so unique and interesting. It's also important to note that your Enneagram number doesn't necessarily have to be like set in stone, meaning a lot of the times people score high in a couple different categories, and it doesn't mean that you're one and only one. Maybe you react differently to certain situations different, or you have multiple traits of different characteristics, and that's normal. There's different facets of us, right? There's different, I might professionally act this way and personally struggle with this, and that is totally fine. What this is not a prescription, right? It's not a diagnostic, this is what's wrong with you. No, the Enneagram is just a way to look at your internal motivations, desires, and behavior. And it allows you to investigate that in an objective way. So I'm excited to dive into this. But first, let's dive into a little bit of the history and where the Enneagram came from. The Enneagram itself is an ancient idea, and it is tied to the Enneagram. Ennea means 9, and gram means written down. And so literally what it means is it's a 9-point symbol to describe the different characteristics of the 9 Enneagram personalities. Some historians trace the Enneagram all the way back to early spiritual traditions, such as the Desert Fathers in Christianity and Sufism in Islam. These traditions used the symbol as a way to explore the human soul and its connection to the divine. Now, it doesn't mean that if you are not religious or spiritual, that this doesn't apply to you, because throughout history, it has been tied to psychological and scientific findings. In the early 1900s, a mystic named George Gurdjieff introduced the Enneagram to the Western culture. He used it as a tool for understanding the laws of the universe and human consciousness. From his work, fast forward into the mid-20th century, we have a Bolivian philosopher named Oscar Ichazo. He expanded the Enneagram and he connected it to 9 different personality types. From his work, Chilean psychologist Claudio Naranjo integrated Ichazo's work with modern psychology. And ultimately, what came out of it was a very accessible Enneagram personality tool for self-awareness and growth. And because of all this work, this is something that is applicable and connected to science because of its ties to psychology. Each type has a unique way that it experiences the world. And within those personalities, there's internal desire and behavior that typically guides how they respond to things. One of the main sources that I'm going to be using throughout this series is The Road Back to You. This is the study guide, but there's also a book on it. It's called The Road Back to You by Ian Morgan Cron and Suzanne Stabile. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Stabile. But this is what it looks like. And I will link this in the description so you can get your own copy. I personally have found that I've used the study guide quite a bit more than the actual book. The actual book obviously is a great resource, but the study guide itself has amazing questions that guide you through self-reflection and offers you the ability to grow and become more self-aware based on how you respond to things. So I highly recommend it. Some of the content that I'm going to be using, I'm getting from this book. So please get a copy. I think you will really love it. What I'm going to do in today's episode, though, is give a brief overview of all of the 9 types. That way, as you listen to this series, you can see and view yourself through those 9 lenses. Not everybody is going to connect with specific types, but what I have found in my Enneagram journey is that it's not only just me, but I have learned so much about the people in my life and that I'm in relationship with. My family, my friends, my partner, my kids. So as you listen to these, I believe that it's important to really learn about all of the different 9 types. So that way you can apply this information not only to you and your personal growth journey, but to your relationships as well. And I think it's going to really make a difference. And it's really going to resonate with those people who may seem stuck or frustrated or maybe stunted in their professional and personal development journeys. Peep, the mouthy wall clock. Thank you, Department of Dental Hygiene. Isn't she beautiful? She's so pretty. Department of Dental Hygiene, link below. So we're just going to go 1 through 9 and just give a brief overview of each of the types. That way, as we get further in the series, you can kind of earmark the episodes that you really, really want to get into and learn more about. The first type is the reformer. Type number 1, also known as the perfectionist. And to me, the perfectionist, that's such a negative connotation. I don't think there's anything wrong with perfection. I myself am not a 1, but I know a lot of 1s. I have a lot of 1s in my life, and 1s are so valuable to a community. So the core motivation of a 1 is to be good, ethical, and right. And their core fear is being corrupt or being wrong. They are the people that are so fearful of doing things the wrong way. And there are some religious pieces. I will say there's a lot of religious undertones in this book. And so this book specifically ties it to a deadly sin to avoid. And for 1s, that would be anger. Reading directly from the book, 1s compulsively strive to perfect the world and become chronically resentful towards those who cannot live up to their standards. And to counter that, the virtue is patience. So 1s in virtue are patient. 1s can learn to accept that there's more than one way to do things and have more patience with the world and themselves for being imperfect. So that is the 1. They are the people in our offices that strive to make sure we're following the rules. They might be our OSHA coordinators, right? And so 1s are great and beautiful, and we love them in the office. Type 1s fall under the gut triad, meaning they typically have this gut response and they act on their gut. They're very much doers. And in the gut triad, we'll see down the road, there's also type 8 and 9, but we'll get to them at the end. But gut triads typically want to do. They're looking for outcomes. Type 2s are helpers. And I have been doing the Enneagram as part of professional development with my students for a very long time. And I will say there's no statistical backing of this, but almost every single year, every single cohort, the majority of dental hygiene students resonate with the type 2. That it's just every year. The type 2 motivation is to feel loved and appreciated, and their core fear is being unwanted or unloved. The 2s fit into the heart triad, meaning that a lot of their responses are tied to a feeling in their heart. And so something to avoid for 2s is pride. 2s secretly believe that other people have more needs than they do, and they would be lost without their help. And to counter that, 2s strive for humility. So 2s can develop humility when they acknowledge their own needs and ask others directly for their help or support. 2s are great healthcare providers, right? Because they're always looking to help. What can I do for my patients? How can I make my patients' lives better? And so for healthcare providers, that is just essential in our day-to-day jobs. Type 3 is the achiever. And again, close second behind type 2, we have a lot of type 3 achievers in dental hygiene. Type 3 achievers' motivations is to be successful and admired. Their fear is to be worthless or to be a failure. Type 3s also fall under the heart triad, meaning a lot of the times the reasons and the decisions that they're making are tied to feelings. For type 3s, their sin is deceit to satisfy their craving for admiration. 3s project crowd-pleasing images that deceive even themselves. And when I read this from this workbook, what I typically think of is social media, right? A lot of the times on social media, people present their best. And this is the essential type 3, meaning they're presenting what they want you to see. They want to be successful or seen as successful. They have the best clothes, right? They have the fig scrubs. They have the fancy loops, and they want to be seen as successful. To counter that, in virtue, type 3s need integrity. By discovering and sharing their true selves with others, 3s learn they are loved for who they are and not for what they do. Type 3 is one of my highest scores, and I have found that to be one of the biggest aha moments of my professional career. It is not about what I do, but it's about who I am underneath. And that has taken me a long time to get there, right? It's not about what we do or what we produce or what we put out there. And a lot of the times that stems back to probably in childhood when you were praised on your grades in school, you're praised on your GPA, you're praised on the papers that you write. And so a lot of that ties to performance. So if that is you, you are loved for who you are. A type 4 is an individualist, and this is the last portion of the heart triad. So 2, 3s, and 4s are all in the heart triad, meaning lots of feelings. So the individualists, their motivation is to be unique or to be authentic. They want to stand out for something that is unique to them only. And their fear is being insignificant or having no personal identity, no thing that makes them stand out. So for the core sin is envy. 4s believe they lack an essential element that will never have the wholeness others enjoy. They envy the normalcy and happiness of others. So they're looking for that unique piece that makes them different. Being different is important to them, being unique and authentic. To counter that, virtue for a 4 would be gratitude. 4s counteract envy when they dwell not on what's missing, but on what's present in the way of their gifts and blessings. So again, having gratitude for what they have and not what they lack is really important in order for a 4 to be full, healthy, and fulfilled. Next, we're getting into the head triad. And so when you think head, we think a lot of that logic, being very logical about what makes sense. And, they're very good at slowing themselves down and thinking with their head. Within the head triad, you're going to find a type 5, which is the investigator. In my experience with the students, of course, we don't have a lot of type 5s in dental hygiene, and I am even struggling finding a type 5 too, but there are a few out there. The type 5 or the investigator is somebody that's very logical and acts on reason. Their core motivation is to gain understanding and knowledge about whatever it is that they're deciding. And their core fear is being helpless or incompetent, meaning they're not understanding the information, the reason behind what decision they're trying to make. The type 5 sin is avarice. They are afraid that they lack the inner resources to meet the demands of life and to preserve independence and energy. 5s hoard knowledge, privacy, time, and space. So 5s, in my experience, are very good at setting boundaries. Sometimes, especially 2s and 3s, they have a really hard time setting boundaries because everything is about the external experience. 5s are the complete opposite. 5s are internal. They hoard their time, their space. They're good at setting boundaries, but sometimes those boundaries can become too far. They're not flexible enough to give out to others. So to counteract that, the virtue for a 5 is generosity. 5s become generous when they relax their mindset of scarcity and embrace the reality of abundance. And so for 5s, it is important for them to become a little more flexible and to get out of their head, right? Same thing for a 6. A type 6 is called the loyalist, and type 6s also a part of the head triad. My brother-in-law is a type 6, and when I say a type 6, I mean to the letter, to the definition. And so because I have a close type 6 in my life, I am very familiar with what it is to be in a relationship with a 6. The core motivation of a 6 is to feel secure and supported, and their fear is being unprepared or unsafe. Safety to them is paramount, and I, again, have experienced this with my brother-in-law. Their core sin is fear. Needing to feel secure, 6s rehearse worst-case scenarios and seek out and attach to strong authority figures and belief systems. This means that they hold tight to the law because the law protects them and makes them feel safe. And when you think of this in a dental hygiene setting, that law might be an OSHA standard, or it might be a diagnostic guideline, right? They need those guidelines and rules to make them feel safe. So this might be somebody that is very serious about setting and following rules. Now, the difference, we talked about the perfectionist. The difference between those two things, 6s and 1s are very similar in following rules, but what we need to understand is the motivation behind why. So for a 6, they're following rules because rules equal safety. Within that boundary of a rule, they know that they can act and make decisions under those rules and always be supported. A 1 is because they don't want to be wrong. Their fear is being wrong. And so those rules give them the security to make decisions and know that those decisions are the right decisions to make. Because of that, the counter virtue for a 6 is faith. 6s can develop faith that renders worst-case scenarios planning unnecessary. And they learn to trust their inner compass to guide them to make good decisions. So for a 6, it's really important to learn how to be able to trust yourself. I know that when I make this decision, I can trust my decision-making abilities and know that I'm going to be safe with whatever outcome is going to happen. The final number under the head triad is a number 7. Enneagram 7s, I think, are my personal favorite, kind of out of envy. Like, 7 demeanor is fun. 7s, they're called the enthusiasts. And it's because they just inherently know how to get the most out of life. And We do have a few students every year that come through that are sevens, and they are the ones that are planning the student parties, and they're planning the graduation PowerPoint pictures, and they're just a ray of sunshine. So if you are a seven, I just have so much love in my heart for you, because I'm kind of the opposite. And when sevens come into my life, I'm just like, wow, I wish I could be open and as free as you. Again, the last portion of the head triad, they do think with their heads. They are the enthusiasts, and their motivation is to experience life fully and avoid pain, which who doesn't have that motivation, right? But their fear is being trapped in pain or deprivation. So not being able to experience life or be in joy. Because of that, one of the sins to avoid for a seven is gluttony. To avoid feelings of pain and chronic deprivation, sevens compulsively plan and gluttonously devour exciting experiences, fascinating ideas, and the best life has to offer, which, when done in moderation, is a great way to be, enjoying life and being happy. There is nothing wrong with that in moderation if it doesn't impact your obligations, right? So to counter that in virtue, sobriety, and this has nothing to do with addiction, but sobriety means exercising self-restraint and accepting and integrating both the joys and the sorrows of life, and following through on long-term commitments with projects and people. How I view this is learning how to counteract fun with responsibility. So learning how to be responsible, learning how to prioritize both. Next, we are going to move on to number 8. And I never know how to talk about 8s because I am an 8. And so sometimes I wonder if I'm not clouded by my internal motivations, but 8s are known as the challengers. In the past, when I have been researching this, one of the funniest things that I heard about 8s is that for everybody else, if you are in a relationship with an 8, to wear a hard hat. And as an 8 myself, I just kind of like, shoot, what does that mean for me? But I want to shed some light on 8s because sometimes I wonder if we don't get a bad rap. Maybe, I don't know. 8s and 3s. 3s can kind of get a bad rap too. Sometimes they say that they're kind of shallow because they're about appearances. 8s kind of get a bad rap because we're aggressive. And if you are a female 8, you're again at a little bit of a disadvantage because female 8s are aggressive, right? And females aren't supposed to be aggressive. So when you talk about the differences, those TikToks that are kind of funny when you compare the verbiage used in successful corporate structures for males versus females, males who are successful in corporate aggression are considered leaders and females are considered bossy. That's kind of the same example here of what I'm trying to get to. The core motivation of an 8 is to protect themselves and others. They are protectors, and when they see injustices happen, they are going to speak on them. The core fear is being weak or vulnerable, and I see this in my life a lot. So just to get vulnerable with you, I am a do-it-yourselfer. I don't ask for help. I don't want help. And if I can't figure it out on myself, I'm going to just fake it because I would rather fake it than be seen as weak or incapable of doing something. And that is a struggle that I have. That's a very personal struggle. So 8 is part of the gut triad. Again, as we talked about with a 1, the gut triad goes with your gut. The gut triads are action people. We do before we think. And that's a very common trait of mine. I do before I think a lot. And that sometimes gets me into trouble. For 8s, our deadly sin is lust. 8s are intense, excessive people who want to be in control and project strength to mask weaknesses or vulnerable feelings. And wow, what did I just say? I kind of just got ahead of myself, right? So when they say lust, obviously we're not thinking about like the traditional lust of two people. We're thinking about intenseness. And so impulsivity or having to feel that intense feeling of pressure sometimes or go, go, go. That is what they mean when they're talking about lust. And so to counteract that, a virtue is chastity. 8s can moderate their intensity, excessiveness, and need for control and recognize the value of vulnerability. 8s find it really hard to be vulnerable. And I have come to learn that when I am vulnerable, that is where I find the most growth. And that has been a hard lesson sometimes to learn because vulnerability, especially for an 8 or even like a 3 or a 6, vulnerability is unsafe. And so we don't feel safe when we have to be vulnerable, unfortunately. So moving on to the last type, this is a type 9. These are our peacemakers. Still a part of the gut triad, meaning doing versus thinking. But the type 9s compared to 7s and 1s are a little less actionable. And so the peacemakers' core motivation is to maintain peace, to maintain harmony. These are people that conflict is unsafe. And you may, if you're feeling kind of tied, you feel related to that, you may have a lot of traits of 9s. If you are like, no, conflict is not for me, I can't deal with conflict. That is their core fear. Conflict or disconnection or feeling outside, feeling other. And so the core sin of the 9 is sloth. 9s are lazy people who merge with the priorities, values, and preferences of others to avoid conflict. And notice when I said lazy, I meant in relationship to others. In that, they don't prioritize themselves. And so please don't, if you're a 9, please don't take lazy as like a dig to you. Really what this means, and the counteracting virtue of this is diligence. So 9s can assert themselves and self-actualize through consciously pursuing their life's agenda, even if it arouses conflict and their fear of disconnection. So what that means is take this as your inner desire to prioritize yourself. And really that is the ultimate goal of a 9, is to be able to prioritize yourself, be able to stand up for yourself or say no or yes more often in the context of prioritizing your own feelings and your connection with others. So what I have learned is that if you characterize yourself with any of these, it's the ones that feel a little bit like a burn. If I was reading a type and you were like, that doesn't really bother me, then that's probably not you. But it's the ones that feel a little too close to home. You know, as I was reading some of those are typically the ones that you're like, ooh, maybe I need to do a little bit more research or learning on this type, because those are typically the ones that hit close to home. And so I know for me, that was a big learning curve in my Enneagram journey. Is I found, especially when they talked about 8s and their inability to feel vulnerable, I was like, wow, you're talking about me. And it didn't feel good. But that's the first step to growth, is trying to address some of those difficulties head on and being able to, 1, be aware of them. That's the first step, is self-awareness. And 2, be able to see how they affect yourself in your life. And so that's the wrap up here. We're going to talk about why this is important and why you should follow along for the next 9 weeks as we dive deeper into these individual types. We're going to be interviewing people who are the type, and we're going to be talking to them about how their preferences and their personality, motivations, and fears play into the workplace and play into patient care even, why it's important. If you had a 9 in your chair and you knew that they were just trying to keep the peace, you might interact with them a little bit differently than you would, say, if it was a 5 in your chair who's very intellectual and logical. you know that they might value maybe a research study more than a 9 who has hard time verbalizing their personal needs and wants. And so I think that's really important to remember, to keep that in our minds. So the first thing is self-awareness. What I want from these episodes is for you to be able to see yourself in these types and be able to understand how they play a part in your motivation, in your behaviors. For example, some of these have very similar outcomes, right? So a type 3 who works really hard and a type 8 who works really hard and has struggles with boundaries, the type 3 is because they need to feel valued, and a type 8 is because they need to feel in control. And so understanding the underlying internal motivation is really the whole point of this. It's not necessarily a prescriptive, well, you need to do this. It's to be able to understand why you respond to certain ways. This can improve your relationships. Aside from just understanding yourself, it helps you understand others. I gave the example of having patients in your chair with different types. This can help you understand why patients might continually react a way that you don't relate with. And that's important because every single patient in our chair is going to react differently than we are. And it's important for us to understand the why behind that. Finally, I hope that this series inspires a little bit of personal growth. What I love about the Enneagram is it doesn't box you into one type. It doesn't say you are an 8, so you will act like this. What it shows you is that some of the tendencies in your life might align in this direction because of this underlying reason. And it's very common for you to have different traits of different Enneagram types. When we do this project with the students, we typically have them look at their top 2 or 3 scores. And that's because you can have different traits in different scenarios. And it's just allowing you to self-reflect and understand why those traits are coming out and how they might be impacting your professional growth or your personal relationships. So by identifying kind of where you are on the spectrum, I would view this more as a spectrum, kind of a spectrum from white to black. In between there's various shades of gray. And so what the purpose of this is to see on that spectrum which shade of gray you are and why you're that shade of gray, right? So that way you can recognize those things in the moment and become the most healthiest version of your strengths. It's great. Even though we say wear a hard hat with 8s, we need 8s to be aggressive when maybe we can't be aggressive. And unfortunately, some of us just have a better talent for being aggressive. So what I hope you have taken from this episode is that Enneagram is not just a personality test. It is a roadmap to help you understand your motivations and desires better, help you improve your personal relationships, and help you improve your performance and your responses in a work setting. So that way you can thrive and you can really understand everybody better. I hope this has been valuable to you. I'm so excited to go through all the 9 types. I have some exciting interviews planned for this. And so I am so excited. Please share, like, subscribe, do all the things. Comment below. Do you know your number? Are you a newbie? Or are you an Enneagram loyalist who has been working on the Enneagram for a long time? I would love to hear. Comment below. What is your number? Are you a newbie or a loyalist? And I will see you on the next episode when we interview an Enneagram 1. We're going to start with 1 and go all the way through to 9. So I'm excited to go on this journey with you. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.